Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Official good morning. Okay, I got the sun in my eye. Oh, I'm going to go over here. So I'm Mark Wood. I'm the Director of Witness and Outreach and also Director of Revitalization. And I do other things too, whatever my boss tells me to do. Which I work in the Office of National Mission in St. Louis. So I am officially an employee of the Missouri Synod. I like to call us Synocrats or Synodocrats, a Synodocrat. But so my background is I'm a second career pastor. My first career was in the defense industry, where I worked in project management systems. So I kind of like a systems analyst, but applied specifically to project management. So I'm a process-oriented person. Everything fits a process. And I learned all about processes when working for companies like Motorola and Six Sigma. I was there when they rolled that out. Magnavox and Total Quality Management, and Raytheon, where we integrated engineering and management processes. And when I got ordained, I said, I'm done with all that. It's great. I don't have to use any of that stuff anymore. And I went off to Florida, where I was a pastor of evangelism for a congregation, and then from there planted a church, and they eventually called me to be their first pastor. And the Office of National Mission heard that there was a Lutheran pastor who did evangelism. And I said, it's like, wow, it's like finding a unicorn or something. So that's when I got called to St. Louis about almost 8 years ago. I said I would spend 3 to 5 years and then go back to the parish. I said 5 years, 3 years if I get off with good behavior. So I'm now 8 years into a 5-year plan. So, which, if you know anything about project management, that's about par for the course. So, but it's been very interesting working for the Synod. All those things that I learned about processes and adult training and all that, all of a sudden I'm using again. It's almost like God had a plan. The good news is He didn't let me in on it, because if you knew what God's plan for you was, it wouldn't go well. So we during COVID, I started working from home like a lot of other people. I said this was nice, and I'm just going to keep doing that. So I convinced them that I could be a deployed worker. And we moved back here to Arizona, where we're from. And but not from originally, but that's where we met. Got married. That's my wife, Mary Ellen, over there. And we have family here. And so it's great to be back in Arizona. And yes, it's cold this morning. So, but it'll warm up, right? Yeah. So one of the things that I do is this program called Revitality. Now, Revitality started out as an initiative based on a resolution that the convention passed in 2013 that directed the Office of National Mission to create resources for congregations that are in decline. So this is how the Synod works. They called me to do evangelism. I'm a church planter. And they said, we want you to do revitalization. So it's like, okay. And at first I was a little like, yeah, that doesn't fit very well. But then I learned the things that we do in church planting actually work really well in revitalization too. In fact, the things that we do in revitalization are really the things we do because we're the church, not because we're the church in decline. These are the things that help make for healthy congregations. And so the name Revitality is a little bit play of words. It's R-E colon, which we know is regarding vitality. And the vitality of a congregation is in God's Word being proclaimed in purity and truth, and His sacraments being rightly administered. That's where vitality is. And so we look at the resources that have been created for Revitality as ways of helping congregations do that better. By better, I mean, how do we increase the use of God's good gifts among ourselves, and how do we share those gifts with the people around us? And so so right now there's 4 modules to Revitality that make up the foundation of this resource. Connected Disciple is outreach. How do we do outreach more effectively? Shepherding our strays, inactive members. Serving in God's mission, strategic planning, and that's tailored for Lutheran congregations. And the newest one, Members of One Body, is Assimilation and Incorporation. What we're going to talk about today are these 2 resources and how together they make up a comprehensive approach to inactive members. And so that's where we're going. Did everybody sign up for that? You know, if you're on the wrong plane, time to get off right now. So we won't watch you get up and leave. All right, so here we go. That didn't go away. Right, there we go. So let's talk about inactive members. I was once an inactive member, so I know what this is like from the other side of the coin. In fact, I spent about 8 years out of the church. And so every congregation should be concerned about inactive members, because you either have inactive members already or you always have the potential for inactive members. And so how big a challenge this is really kind of hard to quantify. We've been to a lot of congregations where we talked about the challenge of inactive members, and the reality is many of them have no idea exactly how many inactive members they have. The districts don't keep statistics. The synod doesn't keep statistics. I've talked to mission executives who they believe that as many as 2/3 of our members are inactive. So if you look at the roster of a congregation and it aggregates up to the Missouri Synod, that means that our 2 million member church body really is only about 1.2 million members, somewhere in that. And that's probably realistic when you look at things. But where are all these other people? So the only way that we can really measure people who are active or inactive is by worship attendance. That's usually the way we do it. And that becomes challenging too, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. The other thing about inactive members is they're easy to overlook. Now all the pastors in here can tell you, you got a lot going on during your day, and usually you're dealing with whatever's right in front of you. So the things that aren't in front of you are easy to sort of put off till later. There's a book that was written with the title that captures this, called Tyranny of the Urgent. You're always dealing with what's in front of you, so you'll kind of overlook other things, even if they're important, like our inactive members. So what do we have here? But getting beyond the numbers, whatever they happen to be, we should keep in mind always that our inactive members are our brothers and sisters in Christ. These are people. These aren't just numbers. These are people, and they're people we know. They're people we have relationships with. They're people we've served alongside of. They're people that we care about. And we often find that they're people who need our attention. So one of my war stories is when I was still a layperson, we lived in Fort Wayne. I worked for Magnavox. Mary Ellen and I were asked to help the seminary teach their students how to do evangelism. It's back in the old days when Dialogue Evangelism 2 was the training program we had. Who did that? Dialogue Evangelism? Yeah, okay. So ask some old pastor about it. You'll see him. He'll still get twitchy. But it was based on Evangelism Explosion or the Kennedy approach, and so they wanted the students to learn about it. So they paired us up and sent us out with these 2 seminary students. Now the host congregation, for some reason, rather than giving us a list of prospects, gave us a list of inactive members. All right. So we go to this inactive member, and this lady, and they're trying to do the dialogue evangelism thing, and we kind of knew better, because this woman, we find out very quickly, she had stopped coming to church because her husband was terminally ill. Now he was Roman Catholic, so the priest was coming and taking care of him, but she couldn't go to church anymore because she had to attend to his needs, and nobody from the Lutheran church ever did anything. I mean, they didn't know about him because he wasn't a member, but they never contacted her. And so he passed away, and she was like, well, why would I go back to church? You know, no one ever even cared. How many of our inactive members find themselves kind of in the same boat? They needed help, they needed care, but nobody reached out to them, and they just disappeared. So we always want to keep the missing people in mind as people who need our care, who need our support and compassion, need an intervention, if you will. So in order to kind of frame this discussion, I'm going to talk about an old idea. I haven't seen this used too much anymore, so I'm kind of resurrecting it. It's thinking of the doors of your church. Now you have a front door, and the front door is where, you know, people show up. You know, if somebody moves into the community, they find you on the web and they show up to your church. Or here in Arizona, where we have lots of winter visitors, they look in the yellow pages and they find your church. Believe it or not, people still use telephone books. That's, yeah. So, but these are typically people who are already Lutherans, or at least Christians who are looking for a church home or visiting you. You know, they're not really the objects of evangelism, though most of the evangelism committees that we talk to focus on these people. Yeah, our evangelism committee calls on all of the people who visit us on Sunday morning. Well, that's not really evangelism. That's hospitality. Okay. Now, so people just show up. That's nice. The church we planted in Florida, we lived in a community that was a master plan community, and they're building all these homes. People are looking for churches, and they show up. We had visitors every Sunday. That's nice, you know. But then you have your side door, and the side doors of the church are not the people who come to worship, but the people who connect with your church in other ways. You have events and activities and ministries that non-church people are coming to and making use of. And that's the opportunity for them to become part of your congregation, not through the worship service, but through relationships. And this is outreach. This is what Connected Disciple really talks about. How to use the side doors of your church to bring people in. All right. But then there's the back door. And the back door are people exiting. And there's lots of different reasons people exit. Somebody who may come through the side door finds out what we teach, believe, and confess as Lutherans and say, well, I don't buy that. Out they go. You know, somebody who comes in the front door may say, well, you know, I don't like this style of worship. Out they go. Or they might say, that was the worst sermon I ever heard in my life. Out they go, you know. So whatever reasons, people leave the back door. But some of them we can address, others we can't. Because some people leave the back door just because they got busy doing something else. And going to church stopped being part of their routine and habit. Now, imagine if we had like a pandemic in our nation. And a disease was spreading around and people decided they needed to close their churches. I mean, this is fictitious, of course. And people stayed away from their churches for 6, 8, 10 weeks. And they started doing other things instead on Sunday mornings. When the churches open back up, guess what? A whole bunch of people have already gone out the back door. And so the back door has many different causes, but it has the same effect. People are leaving. And so those are the doors of our congregation. So when we look at inactive members, what we're looking at is the typical approach is wait till somebody's gone out the back door and then do something about it. It's reactive, you know. And what we want to do is rethink that in terms of being proactive. And that is close the back door. make it so people aren't so likely to go out the back door. And so we're going to talk about some ideas about closing the back door. So keep these words in mind. We have the reactive approach and the proactive approach. And this is, again, everything we've done in the past has really been more focused here, reactive. And we want to talk more about being proactive. But we really need to address both. So let's talk about our flock. If you think of a flock of sheep, there's 4 kinds of sheep in our flock. There are the sheep that are safe because they're close and connected. There are the sheep that are at risk because even though they're close, like they're attending worship service and whatnot, they're not closely connected to the congregation. Then you've got sheep that are straying. They've been gone, but not for a long time. And then strayed. They're gone. All right. Let's unpack each one of those a little bit. So, safe. These are the people who are active in worship. They're close to their shepherd. They're participating in Bible study. And that's great. This is where they're getting their spiritual nourishment from. But they're also not just close to the Lord through word and sacrament. They're also connected to the congregation because they have a role in ministry. They're serving in the church. And that strengthens their connection to the congregation. They're members of groups. So the big group out here in the winter, what, Emmy? Quilters, right? Every congregation in the East Valley has a quilting group. Well, we have quilts going all over the world from Arizona. Is quilting all that important in terms of word and sacrament? No, but it gets people into a group where they're forming close bonds with one another, and there's the word fellowship. In its wide use is the word that would fit here. They're having fellowship with one another. And so what happens? If somebody doesn't show up for quilting one Wednesday, everybody else in the quilting group is going, where's Doris? I don't know. Did you hear from Doris? I don't know. Oh, yeah, somebody knows about it, or somebody doesn't know about it. So they call and say, Doris, we missed you today at quilting. That keeps them closely connected. They're also involved in other activities in the congregation. So if you have a potluck dinner, they're there. If you have some other kind of event, they're going to be there. These are people who are closely connected. Then you have your sheep who are at risk. And the sheep who are at risk, well, these are people, you'll see them at Sunday school, maybe. You definitely see them in worship service every week. They're there. Well, maybe not every week, but they're around. You kind of know them. They once in a while they sit in the wrong pew or something. But they're not really all that connected to the congregation. So they're not in a ministry role of any kind. They're not serving on a board or committee or helping out in one of our outreach ministries, whatever. They don't belong to the groups that we have, and they maybe occasionally show up to something, but they're not all that involved in congregational activities. So you see them on Sundays, but not every Sunday. But that's the only time we really see them, and that's what we say they're at risk because they're not closely connected. The sheep that are straying. These are those who have been absent now. Something has changed. That being around on Sunday mornings isn't happening quite as frequently. And maybe they were in a Bible study and they dropped out. Or they might have been doing something as a role in the congregation and they've stopped showing up for meetings. Or maybe they've even resigned from the board or committee that they've been elected to. And if they were parts of groups like quilters, they haven't been coming to that. And if they were involved in congregational activities, they haven't been showing up. A pattern has changed in their lives, and now they're absent. Now here's the challenging part of this. It used to be years ago, regular worship attendance was how often? Yeah, well, I'm older than you. Used to be every Sunday. That was regular worship attendance. Then the standard kind of shifted. If you're there, 3 weeks out of 4, great. That's regular worship attendance. Then it said, well, if you're there every third week, that's regular worship attendance. And then it became, well, once a month is regular worship attendance. Do you know what the standard is presently when Barna or Pew calls you and asks if you're regular worship attendance? Once every 6 weeks. Yeah. So if you've got somebody who's missing hasn't been to church in 5 weeks, they're not yet considered absent as far as the researchers go. That should frighten us. Yeah. So we have to figure out what works for us, and we'll talk more about that too. So now those who have strayed are those who are gone. I mean, and these are people who have been gone for 6 months or more, and they're not connected at all. I mean, we've lost connection with them. They're not active and involved in the worship life of the congregation. And so these are the sheep that have strayed off. And how many of our inactive members fall into this? Again, the numbers are hard to quantify. Some of them are startling. We went to a congregation in Wisconsin to do a workshop because they had, I'm trying to remember the numbers are, something like 1,800 members on the roster, and of them 1,100 were inactive. And some of them have been inactive not for months, not for years, but for decades. And they're still on the rolls. And it was overwhelming to try to deal with that number of people. And I'll talk more about the challenges of this, but these are sheep, and this is something I really like to emphasize. These sheep have strayed off into, we should consider, grave danger. Now the first thing we do in a workshop, a resource in Revitality, is we provide a Bible study for the whole congregation to do together. So Shepherding Our Strays starts with a Bible study that underscores this point. A sheep that's away from the flock is in grave danger. There is an enemy who is like a ravenous lion seeking to devour. And who's he going to pick off? Yeah, the stray sheep. In Jeremiah it talks about a ravenous wolf wanting to destroy the sheep. And so these are people in grave spiritual danger. That's what our attitude should be. Now maybe, they're somewhere else. Maybe they're safe. But if we don't know, our default position should be, we need to act. We need to intervene because they're in grave danger.
The Bible study is specifically designed to have the entire congregation participate, so that it changes their attitude from, well, they wandered off by themselves, or they did it, or the other attitude. And you address the other attitude.
Maybe. I don't. Yeah. I think I do talk about it.
Okay, all right.
We'll see. We'll see if I talk about it.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, I'll talk about it.
So what do you do if we do a Bible study after church, and we have a couple congregation members that are angry that my husband is doing a Bible study in the fellowship hall because that is where they are to have fellowship and not have Bible study? And I flat out said that. I mean, how do you even approach that?
Yeah.
What's the word fellowship mean?
Yeah.
What does it imply? Yeah, think about it.
Yeah.
In terms of word and sacrament.
So, yeah. So how long, your husband's the pastor?
Mm-hmm.
How long has he been there?
3.5 years.
3.5 years. And when did this start, recently or?
Oh, it was after COVID.
After COVID.
Well, because we didn't do Bible study during COVID.
Yeah.
And we didn't really do fellowship. And we started that back up this year. We started Sunday school back up, and she has flat out said, you're ruining our church if people aren't coming back because you are doing Bible study during your fellowship time.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
and he has
well,
he said, you can still have fellowship time, but I'm going to do Bible study on this side.
yeah.
Unless you just walked out on that.
Okay, yeah.
You're blessed.
Well,
Yeah, don't let one person hold the class.
Well, there's
That's
about
a whole
5 of
other-
them that are grouping with
right, yeah.
And
Well, and
they
part of that
stay
is,
long anyways. Even when even for fellowship time, they're out of there by 10:45.
Right.
Even though, I mean, I don't know.
And to me, that's a conversation. If you want to stop by the booth and yet get his experience or input on that, that would be
Yeah.
awesome.
Okay.
yeah, we're down at the end of the row
Okay.
here where all the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod people are all lined up like
Okay.
prisoners against the wall. And we're at the very end of that.
Okay.
So we have a chance of escaping.
Bye.
So, okay, so come by. All right, so what we're looking at here then when we talk about a comprehensive approach or a 360-degree approach is a one-time reactive response to our long-term inactive members. If we do this right, we only need to do it once. Now, it may take a while, but focus on kind of clearing up the backlog so that we can then focus more on intervening early. Now, short-term inactive members, it's still reactive, but it's early reaction before they've strayed away. But we really want to get to an ongoing proactive response to keep people from becoming inactive. And we're especially talking about the at-risk people. And then encourage the safe sheep to stay where they're at. Keep doing what you're doing, and so you stay safe. So this is the resource for the reactive inactive ministry, and it's the shepherding our strays, the resource. And this is I have a copy of the workbook. So this is one. This one's actually in its full final production. Look at that. Does that scare you? Look at that wolf trying to get you. All right. So, so this one's completely polished, full production version, and you can take a look at that if you want. And the whole idea of this resource is, as Mary Ellen mentioned, a Bible study for the whole congregation. So everybody, it takes the whole congregation to welcome back our inactive members. And you also want to kind of gear people up for the idea inactive members are coming back. Because you don't want this to happen. You go through all these things that are taught in the workshop, and we finally get Todd to come back. Todd comes back on Sunday morning, and the first person to greet him is Bill, who says, "Geez, look who's here! I'm surprised the building doesn't fall down on us." Yeah, all your work just went out the window, right? You want the whole congregation to be attuned to what's going on and how they can help reach out to our inactive members. But we want the workshop to be more focused, to equip a select group of people who are actually going to be doing the work of engaging our inactive members, and we call that a care team. And the thing about the workshop, it's not your typical workshop where the guy from the synod shows up, and he's traveled more than 50 miles away, so he's the expert, and even though he's saying the same thing as your parish pastor says, everybody listens to him because he's from somewhere else. And you spend a whole day going through a bunch of what and why, and then he walks out and you're saying like, wow, that was a great workshop. And nothing changes, right? These workshops, first of all, are self-directed. You run it yourself. There's a leader's guide, a local person follows the leader's guide, all the instructions on video, there are workbooks, there are exercises, there's a case study. You run it. And you don't just do the workshop, you do the workshop in sessions. And at the end of each session, you then do the work that session covers. So that you're not just doing a workshop and then saying, hey, yeah, let's move on to the next workshop. You're doing the learning and doing the work at the same time. So the workshop may take place over weeks or months, depending on what kind of work you're doing. And here's the part you were waiting for. No cost to LCMS congregations. You send an email, and Jenna gets the email, or she or Robbie gets the email, and they pack up the materials that you need and send them to you. So So the whole goal of Revitality was to provide resources to our congregations at little to no cost. So we're able to, thanks to the generous funding of the Schwann Foundation, we're able to do it at no cost right now. So next time you're eating Schwann ice cream, know that you're doing the work of the Lord. So let's talk about the sheep that have strayed and what we're going to do here. So this is late. This is reactive. It's often very late, as I mentioned, decades, which I wish I could say that one congregation is unique in having inactive members for decades, but the fact is it's not. This is really should be a one-time effort, because if we get all the other things put in place, we won't have long-term inactive members anymore. But this is not a one-time effort of let's clear the dead wood off the rolls so we can focus on more important things. Remember, each and every one of these inactive members we should see as a sheep who's in danger. So we're not just going to write them off. We got to go find out what's going on. So I was talking before we started. I was a vicar, a deferred vicar, and the congregation called me to be the pastor of evangelism. I was so excited about that call because I said, look, these people are so into evangelism, they want the pastor to teach them how to do evangelism. Isn't this great? No, you're shaking your head. What did they really want? They wanted me to go do all the evangelism, yeah. So my first thought was, well, you know, we have 1,600 members on the rolls, and we only have 500 people in worship. Where are all these other people? I said, well, let's do the low-hanging fruit. Let's go reach out to the de-churched people who we have a relationship with. But it was so overwhelming. There were so many of them, and I didn't know what to do. So what we did, it turned out to be very productive. We had a homecoming. And we sent letters out to everybody who had been, who was a member of the congregation, whether they're active, inactive, we've seen them or haven't seen them. And we had a big homecoming celebration. And through that, we found out some people had moved out of state, some people had died, some people had joined other churches, and some people were just missing. And we got address corrections. We got, so it helped narrow the focus down to what we needed to be. But that's one of the challenges, is there's often so many people involved, we don't even know where to start. So figure out where to start. Recognize that there are very specific challenges to this that make it difficult. For example, the congregation in Wisconsin had so many inactive members. One of the reasons nobody was taken off the rolls, now they knew some of these people had moved like 4 states away and were never coming back. But the congregation had a cemetery, and the bylaws of the cemetery said you have to be a member of good standing of the congregation to be buried in their cemetery. And Grandma Schmidt said, my kids are going to be buried next to me, and my grandchildren will be married in a family plot. We bought this land, and by God, they're going to stay on the books. And you do not mess with Grandma Schmidt. Right.
Or the quilters.
Or the quilters. Especially, yeah. So okay, we got a challenge here. We also have a confusion. Taking somebody off the membership list of the congregation is not the same thing as blotting their name out of the Lamb's Book of Life, okay? Likewise, having their name on the congregation's roster is not a guarantee that their name is in the Lamb's Book of Life. But there are some people who get those ideas confused. You can't drop them from the rolls. I don't want them to go to hell. Well, we can't leave them on the rolls and pretend like everything's okay either, can we? So those are the challenges we face with the long-term inactive members. And remember always, there are some people who have a legitimate reason for not being here. Like the one I mentioned earlier, whose husband was terminally ill. You have people serving in the military, right? Nancy? You're not going to be at your home congregation. You're going to be off somewhere else. But learn what that is. Don't assume, don't guess. Go learn what it is.
this is what I do.
Yeah.
And so when I'm out there meeting somebody who hasn't been to church for 6 months, and in my experience, at least from our church perspective, most of the people that I am seeing are elderly, like 80 plus. And I've got a lot of 90-year-olds. And this is what happens over and over again. My work expands because they need visitation.
Yeah.
Because they can't go.
Right.
They can't go. They haven't been able to go for 10 years.
Yeah.
They can't drive. They can't move. They can't go. And what I've been frustrated with is how little we know about that. Because when you go and I can get emotional. When you go and they haven't seen anybody in 6 months, they're like, oh, I can get anybody can.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And when that burden of visiting them falls on one person, you do get in a mode where I can't get to these people except once every 6 months.
Yeah.
And part of what we're talking about doing here is sharing that visitation load and equipping people to do that. So someone asked yesterday, who stopped by our table, if this is the same thing as Stephen ministry. I said, no, it's not, but the things you learn in Stephen ministry are directly transferable to this. Stephen ministry is great training for the care team members that we'll be talking about.
And we also talked briefly about some of our inactive members, elderly inactive members, they can't drive and they can't do some things, but they can still write a note or do things like that, like having them do ministry. In other words, give them the names of the visitors and let them sign the card and send it out or whatever. It keeps them connected. Deliver the bulletins to them to be told it. It's more effort, but boy, they feel like I'm still contributing and I'm still part of. So if that's an option, now it isn't always, but just thinking about other ways is something we talk about. Think outside the box.
Yeah.
Our Sunday school kids at like the different holidays, like we had for Valentine's Day, we had them make postcards to every shut-in.
Yeah.
So the little kids got to decorate the cards. And we just started that up during COVID, I think it was. We had so many people not coming to church. And we have gotten so many letters back from the shut-ins that are like, it was just so special to get, the little decorated postcard from the elementary. And so they just loved it.
Yeah.
We're doing an adoption process where my elderly are adopting a college kid, a kid in high school who is going away, and they adopt them. And so they send to adopt is requirements. You have to send them 2 things every year, and that's not a letter. That's something like a gift or whatever for their birthday and at Christmas. And then we would like to see a letter once a month. That's what we're asking. That's the only thing we ask.
But it gives them something.
Yes.
We're always trying to do stuff for them, but really they're like, why am I here on earth still? What do I have? What's my purpose?
And that's the when we talk about being close and connected, close and connected. Having a role in ministry is a way of keeping people connected and close.
Well, what we've also found is that the kids like it.
The kids, and
it keeps the kids connected more than what we anticipated.
Right. So if you've done Everyone is Witness, which I hope you have, if you haven't, come back at 10:30. We'll be talking about that.
Everyone is witness.
Everyone is Witness. It's evangelism.
I got cards for both
Right.
things here.
Okay.
One of the things we talk about are people who head, heart, and hands. Head people are, cognitive. They look at everything from that intellectual, cognitive perspective. Heart people more on emotional level, and hands people are doers. So I'm a head person, right? So my answer to everything is cognitive. So this really grates me to say this. So, but over and over and over again, what we get back to here are relationships. The church is about relationships, and when people are disconnected and have broken relationships, they're going to wander away. They're going to find relationships in other places. So even your women, well, we'll talk about this when you stop by, but this woman that you're talking about, I think she sees her relationships under threat, and that's why her reaction is the way it is. So, what you're doing with adoption, you're creating and strengthening relationships. The cards, there's relationship building going on. So all you heart people, you win this round, okay? Relationships are important. And when people are not connected, they'll wander off.
The other thing we have found is that because of COVID, went home to come to church, and so we were streaming before, but we increased our streaming as far as its quality, and we're streaming. I've got over 100 people that have never changed. They love this, and they get to do church at home with their jammies and coffee, and they're content.
Yeah.
And getting them back.
Right. Well, this is dangerous because, well, they're sitting at home in their pajamas. They're not connected. They're not. These are relationships are going into atrophy through this disconnection, through this online. Yeah. So it's really important to be bringing people back together when we can, when and where we can.
In our young church, like we have lots of young people our age that have kids that are in sports, and before they wouldn't do as much. Now that COVID and that we have the online, because we didn't do any streaming before. And now they're like, well, we can just watch it later.
Right.
So we sign up for the wrestling meet on Sunday morning because it doesn't matter because we can watch it
right.
later.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
We had to.
So I think we're gonna
understand the danger.
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
I think we're gonna see that attitude lead to more inactivity.
Right. We actually thought about removing it.
That's my husband's like, until we cut that off.
Right.
You know.
But we can't do that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So what a quandary, right?
Yeah, it's
so.
Maybe you can just record it and just send it to him.
Well.
Like the ones that actually.
You can make them close groups.
Well, you can't. Yeah, there are ways to do this. To say only the people who we want to see this are going to be able to see it. Yeah. So, but we have to move on.
Yeah.
Can't solve all of our challenges at once. All right. Oh, and I don't want to forget this. Don't forget the awkwardness of all this. It's awkward. It's awkward for us. It's awkward for them. In the materials that we created, we have scenarios where, somebody is showing up and it's like, yeah, I know why you're here. It's awkward. It's just no getting around it. We just have to get past that. I also mentioned less than successful previous efforts. People have had bad experiences with inactive members, long-term inactive members. And some of them were well-intentioned, some of them were not. Let's just write letters to everybody and send them out certified mail. See who answers. Yeah, not very good. So you may find people who are a little reluctant to help reach out to inactive members because they have just a bad experience in the past. The strayed sheep, we want to assess where they are, what's going on, keeping in mind, as I mentioned, there's that ravenous wolf. Some have safely strayed into other Christian churches. So when we learn their story, we say, okay, we wish you would come back to St. John by the Sea, but you have a new church home. That's great. We don't have to worry about you anymore. But some have strayed into false churches. If you live here in the Phoenix area, Mormon churches are everywhere. People end up in because Mormons are strong on relationships, and people get connected through relationships, and they end up in a Mormon church, and they don't even realize they're in a false church. But some, and I say probably most people who stray away, they just stray away. They're gone. They're not in any kind of church. So we have to. Don't treat everybody the same, I guess is the point here. And then to engage them, we provide in Shepherding Our Strays ideas for templates, profiles, a process for reaching out to people, and reaching a point of resolution. And resolution is either restoration, that's the preferred resolution, release, because they have joined another church, or removal because they've requested that we don't want to be part of the church anymore. So how long does it take to get there? Could be weeks, could be months, could be years. We're not working to a schedule. We're working towards a resolution. Sometimes it calls for a lot of patience.
What's the difference between release and
Releases if they've joined another church. We're releasing them from membership in our church so they can be members of another church. Removal is saying you're just removed from the rolls. You're not part of the church anymore. So that usually comes at their request, though that could, if you're following Matthew 18, it could come as a result of excommunication. So we talk about the differences in the workshop. So, all right, straying sheep. So these are, again, those people, something's changed. They're not around. They were around, but now they're not. We're still reactive, but it's early reactive. This will always be ongoing. You may put an end to your long-term inactive members, but the way you'll put an end to your long-term inactive members is because you're doing a good job here. So you got to stay diligent. And while the reaching out to strayed members is very individual, very specific to the individual, this is a little bit more generic. All right, so it fits a process a lot better. So here's the process. Speaking of process, here it is. So people are moving from straying to strayed. We have a process where we make contact. So the first contact is we noticed. Second contact, we care. Third contact, we're concerned. And then it goes into the ongoing contact, where these are actual care team visits. Again, working towards a resolution. And so we're trying to keep straying members from becoming strayed members, but it may end up, just no reaction. So the first contact, the we noticed contact. Here we're talking about somewhere around 3 to 5 weeks of absence. Just a friendly note, hey, we noticed you weren't in church. We just want to let the person know that their absence was noticed, because in our world today, it's easy just to overlook people and say, I haven't been to church in 4 weeks, and nobody even cares. So, we'll see what happens if I stay away 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, a year. Nobody's noticed. I guess I wasn't that important to them. We have some role-playing scenarios that we wrote for the shepherding our strays. They're optional because Lutherans and role-playing just don't seem to go well together for some reason. I don't know. But we've had some interesting experiences with actual role-playing. But one of the scenarios picks up on this idea. I went away, nobody noticed, nobody cares. So that's the straying sheep. We noticed.
It's important to know in the workshop itself, like when it says use template, you're gonna work through creating a template and what that would contain. You're gonna work through these things. So we're not just saying do this, we're also saying how to do this.
Yep. So the second contact of we care, this is a little bit more formal. Somebody's been gone 6 to 9 weeks. You may even request a response. Provide a little card or something. Let the person in the congregation know that you do care about them. I guess the message here would really be summed up as saying, we miss you. And we have to be sincere about that. Hopefully you do miss them. Saying, wow, I'm glad they're not around. So.
And the we noticed.
Yeah.
The we noticed is huge.
It is. Yeah. Especially in a culture where everything seems so anonymous anymore. Yeah. So, and then the third contact, we're concerned. Now we're saying, yeah, you've been gone for a while. Now we say don't use the word problem when you address this. We have a problem here. Again, we worked that into a scenario. But what are you going to do? What's your reaction? What would your reaction be if somebody came to you and said, well, we're here to address a problem?
Whose problem?
Yeah, you're the problem. People get defensive, right? Now, we say phone call here because we've already tried written communication. But, boy, aren't phone calls problematic today? I mean, this is really challenging. Just trying to make contact here, really going to be tough. But again, being persistent helps out here. And then, so that's the 3 contacts for straying members to keep them from becoming strayed. And if none of those work, then what we do is we put them for personal contact through the care team. And it kind of picks up here the same way we would deal with a strayed member, where you're having somebody actually schedule a visit and going to visit them and sitting down with them and talking through what are the issues that are going on. So we're just trying to keep the straying member from ending up strayed. Now the workshop, so here's the template again, the steps that we go through. And this is also, as Mary Ellen was mentioning earlier, this is a great way to get people involved. Like somebody may be really happy to write friendly notes, we noticed you're missing, but they would die if they actually had to go to the house of somebody who's an inactive member or make a phone call, right? So you can line people up with their gifts and interests, and they can, different kinds of people can carry out these different steps.
Including maybe shut-ins.
Yeah.
First card, they're great.
Yeah.
If they can still write.
So that's the reactive stuff, you know, all that reaction to people who have disappeared, short-term or long-term. But I think the challenge for us and the place we want to be is to get to the proactive side. So, and proactive is addressed in the resource, and this is a brand new, we just did our first pilot workshop of this resource called,
It went really well.
yeah, Members of One Body, Prospering in the Body of Christ. The premise of this is that the body of Christ, the congregation is the body of Christ in a place, and it's made up of all the parts that God has chosen to bring together to form this unique body in this place, and every part's important. Right? So 1 Corinthians 12. Right? And if somebody is not involved and active, the body isn't working the way it's meant to work. And you may feel like you're an insignificant part of the body, but you know what the eye can't say to the foot, I don't need you, right? So what we want to do is help people understand their place in the body of Christ. And we start with a Bible study for the whole congregation, and then we have a workshop that equips AIM team members. Now AIM stands for Assimilation and Incorporation of Members. See the pattern? It follows a lot like shepherding our strays. But it's just a flip. It's not after people are leaving, it's before people are leaving to hopefully prevent that. And like our other revitality resources, no cost to our LCMS congregations. Now, that being said, this will eventually be a fully self-directed workshop like Shepherding Our Strays. But notice, this is pretty and shiny and glossy, and this is drab. Because this is a draft. And the way we create revitality resources is I sit at my computer and I create in PowerPoint the most fantastic resource ever created by a human being in the course of human history. And it is absolutely perfect for its application. Then we go out to a congregation and present it. And we discover all the ways that it isn't the perfect, best ever resource ever created. And sometimes it's actually hilarious how spectacularly it fails.
We were really excited about our first one because of this one.
Yeah.
Of course, we've done.
So this is the fourth in the series. So
Yeah.
this pilot, we did our first pilot last month in Florida, and it actually went really well. And I'm like, boy, I'm getting so close to retirement, and I'm finally getting my act together. And so funny how that works.
So if you want to be a guinea pig.
So we're still looking. We're doing our second pilot session next month in Springfield, Illinois. We're still looking for congregations willing to pilot this resource. So pilot, we come out and do it in person, and we do it all in 2 days, and then leave you an action item list. But that's a really important step to get to the next part, where we do beta testing, where we put a draft version together as self-directed and send it out, and then get feedback from people before it goes into production. So if you're interested in signing up either to be, we don't call you guinea pigs, we call you innovators for either a pilot or a beta test, let us know. We're always looking for those opportunities. Because we try to do it at large congregations, small congregations, rural congregations, suburban congregations, get a mix so that the process and the tools can be applied in any congregation. So, all right, so that's where we're at right now with that one. So this is focused on the sheep who are at risk. Remember, we're going to close the back door. And this is going to be ongoing. We'll always be doing this. There'll always be sheep at risk. And this is going to be very systematic, very process-driven, but very individualized too, because every part of the body is different, right? And it's relationship-oriented, a lot like the care team members going out and visiting people. So this is the definition I've come up with for assimilation and incorporation. Our congregation's intentional efforts to help people who have joined us develop a strong sense of belonging, then guide them as uniquely crafted members of the body of Christ into meaningful roles in our congregation's mission. It's a very robust definition, and in the workshop we actually break it down and talk about each part of it and how it's important to being proactive. Here's our process as we work through this. What we're trying to do is help move people from at risk to safe. And the starting point is gathering, and that's all those doors of the church again, whether it's a front door or a side door. People gather in our church. The word join isn't necessarily the same everywhere. I learned this in Florida. Florida's not exactly a bastion of Lutheranism. In fact, I call it the Lutheran Sahara. But then Arizona isn't much different. So, versus the Midwest, where churches have been well established for decades or 150 years or 175 years, and things are different. And so what join means in your congregation may be different what join means in another congregation. Some may be very formal. Until you stand up front and make a confession of faith and we give you the right hand of fellowship, you haven't joined. But in my experience in Florida, we counted people as joined who worship regularly with us, even though they hadn't officially become members. We had people who were more active as non-members as our members were active. So don't think of join as just the formal membership. It could be other ways that people join. But then however they join us, then they go through a process of assimilation. A sense of belonging is what we're aiming towards. And then once they have that sense of belonging, then incorporation. What part of the body are they? And notice the word incorporate, corpus, body. I think it's a good term. The analogy I like, I've stole this from Mark Thompson. I don't know if anybody know Mark. He's with the seminary now in St. Louis. Okay. Yeah, so I stole this from him, so I'll at least give him credit. So he doesn't get any compensation, but he gets credit. So think of a family. When you, most of us are married here, when you married into the family, you join the family. Now, you may not know your in-laws very well, they may not know you very well, but guess what? You're family now. You've joined the family. But over time, you start to assimilate. We always open our Christmas presents on Christmas Eve. Well, we always open ours on Christmas morning. So you assimilate. You start to do things the same way, which is however your wife wants them done. So, because when do Christmas decorations go up? They go up Christmas Eve and they stay till Epiphany, right? I mean, no, they don't. Silly me. Why did I think such foolish things? They go up. But that's a process we go through where you get to know your family members, you get to know your in-laws, and during this process, Mary Ellen's dad went from being Bob, I called him Bob, to I call him Dad. I have a sense of belonging in the family. When people call you and ask you for money, you belong. You're part of the family, right? You're invited to all the family events. You go on the family cruise. That was a plus. Yes?
I was going to say, I saw this in our congregation. I hadn't seen it very much. The other day we had some people come to church and they joined our Bible study. And joined is a loose word.
Right.
They come to it. Well, I knew they're starting to assimilate when the Bible study invited them over for a bonfire.
There you go.
And I thought, this is really interesting.
Yeah.
And then I get invited too as the pastor, and so got to know them. Normally, I have to do it the other way around.
Right.
I try to get them involved, but they actually, the members invited.
Right.
Which is even better.
It is much better. Yeah.
This line reminds me of the behave, believe, belong, which was kind of the standard for the church. You believe, you behave correctly, and you belong. And it seems that is shifting to belong, believe, will work on behavior. Mm-hmm. It's interesting to watch the change, because you became a member because you believed.
Yeah.
And we're actually looking at reaching out and getting people involved as a community to then be able to share.
Yeah.
Because it's just working backwards.
Yeah,
that's previous in the gathering. I would say
yeah.
he's talking about.
In the gathering part, yeah, in gathering we may have people who believe and don't believe. They're coming together through front door or side door. There's where relationships are being built. When we get to this point, we're looking at, we call it the common bond as a shared confession of faith. And so up to this point, that isn't necessarily there. And then, can you belong before you believe? Well, yeah, you can belong before you believe in the sense of relationships and fellowship in the wide sense, but you can't belong to the body of Christ until you believe in Christ. So then carrying that analogy further, prosper in a family, so my in-laws start asking me to do things. They know I'm handy, and my father-in-law is anything but. We'll ask Mary Ellen about him sawing a couch in half. So now I can contribute to the family. I don't just belong to the family. I have something to offer to the family, and so I come and do handiwork and help out and make a contribution. Well, that carries over to our church family too. Where the sense of belonging, as you're talking about, hey, come to the bonfire. Come hang out with us, have a meal together. Now we're feeling like we belong, and the next step then would be, how can you participate in the mission of our congregation? So quite often we go from here to here and we lose people. It's like, okay, you've joined, you filled out you did the right hand of fellowship in the worship service, now fill up a time and talent survey. Oh, we want you on the trustees. You haven't worked at helping them have a sense of belonging before, tapping them on the shoulder. So, yeah, it's akin to when they put the boxes of envelopes out at the end of the year, and then the boxes don't get picked up, and say, we need to go visit this person. Their envelopes are sitting here. Why are you visiting them? you care and concerned that they're absent? No, it's like their envelopes are here. We need to do something about that. So this is the whole idea: is shut the back door. Again, very, very much about relationships. And this is a good point you brought up, and we emphasize this a lot in Connect to Disciple. The pastor cannot be the relationship builder of the congregation. The pastor should be involved in relationship building, but if he's the relationship builder, then all the relationships are with the pastor, not with the congregation. The pastor retires, dies, takes a call. Guess what happens to all those relationships? They're gone. You want to spread the wealth. You want relationships between members of the congregation. And besides, the more relationships there are among the members of the congregation, the stronger those relationships are. That sense of connection we talked about earlier. So, yeah.
It's kind of the one definition I use of fellowship is talking and eating with people. This fellowship, breaking bread over a table, or something we've brought back. And I've noticed this throughout the Synod. People are having donuts and coffee ahead of or after
Right.
church once again, which is really healthy because it promotes people talking.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I like that understanding of fellowship in the wide sense of the term. It's, anything that has us working, spending time together, talking with one another. Food is often involved, and that's great. Look at how Jesus had fellowship. Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your house tonight. It's like we're going to eat together. Some people get hung up with the word fellowship and want to limit it only to word and sacrament ministry. Okay, we'll just call that fellowship in a narrow sense. All right, great. But that's, people want to fight over words, and we're missing the main point. We want people to feel connected. We want them to have relationships, because until they do, they're at risk. It's easy to wander off. And so this transition from join to belong, made up of these 4 actions, which we unpack in the workshop, to include, explore, connect, and encourage. Then the transition from belong to incorporate has these 5 actions that we talk about, and that leaves us with our last group of people, our last kind of sheep, and those are sheep that are safe, and that we just want to encourage them to keep doing what they're doing, right? And watch for changes. That's the key thing. Watch for changes, because somebody can easily go from safe to at risk. And so if there's a change in the pattern, it calls for us to intervene. All right. So here's Mary Ellen has little cards that has this information on it. But this is the key to everything is our email address, WOR, which stands for Witness Outreach and Revitalization, at lcms.org. And if you send an email to that address and say, hey, I want more information about, Jenna will be happy to tell you all about it. So, or you can stop by our table out there, and at Murderer's Row, and we can tell you more about it. And so,
have with us today, I do have a copy of the Bible studies for both. There is no quick guide, which is what I'm handing you. There's no quick guide for members of One Body because he's lazy.
Yeah. No sense making a quick guide when the piloting is going to tell me how badly I messed it up. And any other questions or comments?